Hello everybody, today we're going to talk about the first chapter of the Secondary 4 textbook, which is on social study, and it's about the 1990 Iraq-Kuwait War. It's a fascinating topic, and if you look at the background, there are fire burning and burning from the ground. Of course, if you need to burn, you need a fuel. And where do you think the fuel come from? And if you see, there are lines, so there are oil lines where they transport the oil and it's burning up the oil. So later we'll talk about why is this significant. This is the year 1990 and it has been 25 years and counting. So 2nd of August, Iraq invaded her neighbor, which is Kuwait, and this war eventually caused, let's look at consequences. You have 30,000 dead. The dead was so much they actually have to cover them in body bags. Yes, that's how serious it is. And you have over 400,000 made homeless. They refuse to participate in the war because if they do so, they might be killed. In order to save themselves, they have to leave their homeland, which is a very sad fact during a war. So, fighting the Iraqi armed forces, he created this thing which is quite famous, and it's called the highway of death. So if you look at the left, this is what happened when they're fleeing. They were in their trucks, their vans, their vehicles, they were leaving, but it was so jammed that people had to abandon their vehicles. And after the war, this is what happened. The tanks rolled past, they trashed all the cars and all that, and this is what's left after the war. And this reminds me of they call it the highway to hell, and it's one of my favorite songs. Oh yeah. Okay, this is a famous song by AC/DC, and it totally describes this highway now, and it's in one of the ways in Kuwait. So almost 100,000 surrounding Iraqi soldiers at the end of the war, they were actually considered as prisoners of war because they decided to surrender because the conditions were that they were in no way they are going to win. So the best way to survive at that point of time is to surrender as a prisoner of war. And let's take a look. The retreating Iraqi armed forces. So while some of them are surrendering by the batches, and while they are actually the very loyal armed forces who are retreating, they actually created 600 oil wells in Kuwait. They set them on fire. Actually, the US soldiers entered the war to help the Kuwait. So they do not wish for them to use the oil. So if I can't use it, you shall not use it as well. So they start a fire this oil well, so to prevent them from using. And when you have so much oil in Kuwait, and when you conquer them, that is one of your resources. And if they do not wish for the US to use them, they are not going to give them barrels of oil. So they dump 11 million barrels of oil into the Sea of the Persian Gulf. And if you look at the oil swirls there, is incredible because this is taken from the satellite picture. And look at how much oil actually can cover the sea. So you have unbelievable environmental damage for no apparent reason. Well, they just refuse to let the US or the Kuwait have it. And look at the poor bird. Okay, this war and the political situation between Israel and Palestine led to a very, very famous incident which happened in the US. So first, you have rise in terrorism worldwide, or what we call transnational terrorism, which will be the next topic. And the second part will be a huge drop in the popularity, or you can say, or the public image of the US. People start burning their flag, and because US interfere and it projects the image that US is a busybody, it should be solved by the Arab countries and not US. It also indirectly led to the September 11 or the 9/11 attack on the World Trade Center in New York, where two planes were actually sent crashing into the Twin Towers in New York, and it caused at least the top half of the building to crash and split into half, and lots of US citizens were killed. Why do we study this for Singapore social study? I mean, doesn't seem to make sense. This is in the Middle East, and how is it related to Singapore, where it is stuck in Southeast Asia? So there's a connection between Kuwait situation and Singapore. Let's take a look. There are 4 points. The first one is Singapore has a small population, well, our target is 6.9 million. And Kuwait has a small population, 3 to 3.5 million at that point of time, of course. And Kuwait's local population is only 1 million, the rest are foreign workers. So they actually have a very small local population and they have a very large foreign workers. The same applies to Singapore. Singapore has a very small Singapore population. If you have 6.9, Singapore population will be around 3 million, and the rest will be foreign workers and PR, permanent resident. So Kuwait's defense force is tiny, so she relies on US as a protector and main oil trading partner. And look at Singapore, isn't she big? I mean small. So unlike Singapore, Kuwait is rich. Singapore doesn't have any resources. Singapore does have some resources. I wouldn't call them resources as compared to other countries, but Kuwait is rich. She has oil and lots of oil, but similar to Singapore, other than oil, there's no other natural resources. It's desert and more desert from the pictures you can see. You lead directly to the next chapter, which is on transnational terrorism, and you have a project to complete for this chapter, and most importantly, it hasn't come out for 2 years, so you like marks. So this is very, you guessed it, important. Okay, so the next 2 or 3 lessons will cover the basic events of the war. You have the causes of war for the SEQ. The acronym in your notes is called Iraq, and you have the impacts and result of the war for the SEQ. The acronym is KILLED, which is killed. Okay, basic events of war. To understand what is it, you need to understand the sequence of the war. We set the scene. So this is a picture of the world map. And where do you think it occurs? Let's zoom in. Zoom. Okay, so next part, Middle East. If you take a look at the pink area, you'll find it right smack in the middle is Iraq, our lovely antagonist of the show. So, and it's just below, if you see, there's a small area. It's called Kuwait, just above Saudi. And there's a small one near to the Persian Gulf. It's called Kuwait. It's very small compared to Iraq. Okay, let's take a look. So we have the main characters stepping up. The first is Iraq. We call it the antagonist. And the first one, you have a population of 31 million. That's a huge population compared to Kuwait. You've seen a while. Mostly Arab and Muslim, 97%, with other small minorities like Christians and Kurds. And you have economy mostly based on the production of oil. They have oil. So military of over 1 million soldiers, over almost 2,000 tanks, and 300 plus modern jet aircraft, plus a small navy. The reason why it has a small navy because it is not surrounded by sea, so navy wouldn't be a main priority. So the leader is President Saddam Hussein. This is him in 1979, looking smart and handsome in the suit. This is him in 2003, where he actually escaped and he was found. Okay, you see that he has not been shaving for a while. And this is 2006, where he was about to be hanged. He was tried as a war criminal for war genocide, for killing a lot of Kurds. Later you'll get a chance to take a look. So the second main character, you can call him the victim, is called Kuwait. So what happened is that Kuwait has only 1/10 of the population, about 3.5 million, mostly Arab, similar, 85%, with other small Asian minorities like Indian, Pakistani. And the economy similar, basically based on the production of oil. And the military is only 15,000 compared to 1 million, most 300 tanks and 100 plus modern jet aircraft and a small navy. So you can see that in terms of military and population wise, Kuwait just doesn't match up. So Kuwait's leader is Emir Jabbar Al Ahmad Al Jabbar Al Sabah. You're looking quite handsome actually. So the third character is United Nations, and if you know United Nations, the main character or the main country that is supporting is the United States of America, or you call it USA in short. And the president of USA during that time is George H.W. Bush Sr. And this is not to be confused with the US president from 2001-2009, George W. Bush. Well, if you take a look, they look rather similar, don't they? So what? They're the same character. Well, they definitely are not. One is a father who is on your right, and on the left is the son. So please do not be confused. One face shape is sharper than the other. So the main partners of the USA was Britain. The Prime Minister of Britain at the time is John Major, and let's take a look. Wow. Okay, that's him. And the Prime Minister of Singapore at the time is Goh Chok Tong. The reason why I show this is because they look absolutely similar. Let's take a look at John Major, Goh Chok Tong. Similar, aren't they? Okay, so the fourth character is Iran. Later we'll talk about why it's in the picture. Iran is just beside Iraq. Look at the picture. If you see that Iran is just beside and is way bigger than Iraq. Iraq is small compared to Iran. So it's the next door neighbor to Iraq, and it fought the 8-year war with Iraq, and from 1980 to 1988. So they fought against each other, and their leader is called Ayatollah Khomeini. Causes of the war, this for SEQ, the acronyms is called Iraq. The first one, I. You see at the bottom, that will indicate I. In the past, the historical relation between Iraq and Kuwait. Iraq and Kuwait have always been ruled as one territory. In the past, it was a part of the Ottoman Empire. So if you look at Ottoman Empire, this is how big it is. Under Sulaiman I in the 1580s, is just this entire part. Last time under Ottoman Empire, they are ruled as one. But if you see later under the British Empire, they are actually ruled as one as well. And all those in red are considered as the British Empire, but including Singapore as well. So under British Empire, Kuwait and Iraq were still ruled as one territory. And if you take a look, when British gave Kuwait their independence, Iraq objected in 1961 as they felt that it was not fair to take away a part of their territory. So it's the same compared as the reason why you look at a picture is the idea that at a point of time, British Empire is big and huge and powerful as compared to Iraq. So the objection is similar to the little boy over there. They can object for all they want, but still, the big boss is British. So even though it's not fair, yes, you take away part of my territory, you give them independence, but still, they can't do much. So they have to accept it. If you look at a larger, more powerful country wanting ownership of a small area, because you'll never consider separate through history. If you take a look, does that look similar? If you look at Malacca, the entire area under the British is controlled as one territory under the British Empire too. And there's one island there which is not labeled, which I'm perfectly sure you know which country that is. So we shall move on first. Rebuilding the Iraqi economy. So this is under the letter R, and what happened is that during the Iran-Iraq war, before Iraq invaded Kuwait, there was this war which lasted 8 years. And when you go to war, what happened is that you need a lot of money to buy tanks, weapons, airplanes, and whatever that you need to win the war. And that include ammunitions, food, water, tanks. So they spent a lot on these resources to fight the war. And when they ended the war, Iraq obviously was in ruins because it's borrowed a lot. So you take a look. So what happens is that Iraq tried to invade Iran. They actually engaged in a lot of chemical warfare. So this is them in a chemical suit to prevent them from dying. There's obviously an Iran soldier with a leader in his pocket. So what happened is that they die not because they are fighting the war, they die because they breathe in the dangerous chemicals released by the two parties, and well, it's a very, very, very dodgy warfare. In the Iraqi economy was also badly in debt. He need a lot of resources, so he borrowed a lot of money, and this money obviously need to be paid. So he's in debt to a country, especially to U.S. and France, because Saddam Hussein borrowed billions of dollars to buy, what do you buy? Aircrafts, you buy tanks. You need to win the war, you need all this hardware. So when you are borrowing all these debts, you need to pay back after the war, assuming you win. But here's the problem. Iraq was not able to make a lot of money as expected for the oil. Remember, it does have resources, and the only resources and is oil. OPEC members are countries like UAE and Kuwait. They are those who set a price for the oil, because these regions, all these countries, they produce the oil in the world. So when they set a price, you stick to the price, and you're able to control the price, assuming that everyone follows the price. So they did not follow the oil production quota, means that they produce extra oil because they want to earn more money. And because they produce extra oil to be sold at the price goes down, and Iraq was not able to make as much money, and it was, I would say, quite pissed. OPEC members, if you take a look, there are quite a number of countries. Indonesia is one of them. Yes, Indonesia produces oil, and you have United Arab Emirates, Qatar, you have Kuwait, Iran, Iraq, Algeria, Libya, Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, Venezuela. The year below indicates the year that they will join them. This is A. Accusation over territory. You have Rumaila and Bubiyan, Waba, these areas. So Iraq actually accused Kuwait of stealing oil from the site of the Rumaila oil field, which is this Rumaila oil field is a place in Iraq, but Kuwait is just beside it, using slant drilling technology. So this is the area if you take a look. it stretches from Iraq all the way to Kuwait. So, but there was a line drawn between. So, they're using this technology is called slant drill technology. And if you look at the line that is drilling into other place. So, originally a horizontal well is drilling straight down. So, underneath is my well. I will drill and go through. But in case of a slant hole, well, if you go to the blanket reservoir, you have to use a slant drill. So, it's more effective, but wait. Is going to other people's territory. That's what they said. So, assuming that if you claim that the top part of your land is your territory, the below part is obviously yours as well. So, this is what they claim. Also, they accuse Kuwait of denying them access to the sea because Kuwait refused to allow Iraq to use the island ports of Bubiyan and Wabah. If you take a look in the middle, you have see Bubiyan, and because they need to ship out their oil, so it will be a very, very useful place for them to actually use it as their shipping ports to ship out. Okay, if you look at the picture, right, what happened is that there was an agreed upon maritime boundary. Wabah and the Bubiyan in the middle of the picture belong to Kuwait. So you expect that they won't allow you to use. You just like if Singapore, you won't allow Malaysia to use our port because it belongs to your territory, is your own sovereignty. So, well, Iraq accused them of not allowing them to use because this has allowed them to sell their oil. And if you look at Iraq, well, Saddam Hussein character and leadership is a very queer man. He likes to create these pictures of himself and statues of himself. Well, in front of people, there was in gold, in white, in different kind of headdress, and you have the one in berry at the bottom. So his way of leadership, I would say, is quite queer. Well, he likes himself a lot. That's what I can say. So interview with Saddam Hussein himself. Let's take a look.
Have you ever personally killed someone who opposed you?
Never. Never. I have never killed anyone. There's no one who can talk to you about the costs of doing this or the impact of doing that. There's no one who will do it anything else.
So when Saddam Hussein decides to move into Kuwait and turn the world against him, it's a decision made in isolation. An isolation so complete that Israeli intelligence has even looked at handwriting analysis, trying to penetrate the workings of Saddam's mind.
The moment I saw this handwriting, it reminded me immediately of the handwriting of Stalin. The line is so similar. The drive is very strong. The need for attention is exactly the same.
And the Israelis aren't the only ones who draw that comparison.
He sees himself as a kind of Arab Stalin, somebody who rules by a combination of terror, some degree of social welfare, distributing the wealth which he gets from oil, and by military confrontation with enemies outside.
We have heard that Stalin is a personal hero.
No doubt, amongst his people, he was a hero. In the sense that he took a very tough position, a very strong position during the Second World War. In this respect. However, I have never said that he was a hero.
So from this interview, right, you can see that his personality is that he made the decision to invade Kuwait in isolation, meaning that he doesn't consult with his advisor or what does other people think of him. He just do it. So his personality is a one of a kind because usually what people who oppose him will usually end up, well, dead. And if you look at the cross at the top, it's called a victory arch. Victory arch is photographed, so basically they were actually modeled after Saddam Hussein's hands. So if you look at the two hands at the bottom, they're carrying a sword, and guess who created it? Let's look at the third part. How did it begin? How did this war begin? So initially what happened is in 28th May 1990, so Iraq complained to the Arab League. So this is like a Singapore relationship to ASEAN. So Arab countries, they actually created a league to solve their own problems. So UAE and Kuwait agreed to follow OPEC oil production quota. And 18th of July, around 3 months later, Iraq warned Kuwait not to involve the US and wants Arab League to settle this matter instead. So Iraq wanted join Arab country. I'm an Arab country. I would like us to solve it using the Arab League, not using the US. US is considered an outsider. So on the 24th of July, Iraq began military build-up at the Iraq-Kuwait border. So on the 24th of July, you start seeing tanks, military personnel, you start seeing airplanes start placing themselves near to the border. This is a sure sign that, well, something is going to go down. So let's take a look at the Arab League. Okay, so if you take a look, this is just a parody image, but what happened is that these are the countries, all those Arab countries, they are actually part of the Arab League. And if you look at the appeasement, so what happened is that 27 or 28, remember the build up at 24th of July, 27 to 28th of July, what happened is that 3 days later, OPEC agreed to raise oil price by, wow, 30%. It's just like $100 barrel of oil now costs $138.80. So what happens is that Saudi Arabia and Kuwait cancels Iraq war debt. Well, appeasement. So about 3 days later, say, okay, how about we cancel debt, so you don't have to pay us back, because, well, you're in deep trouble and we are in Arab League. So Kuwait loans a further US $500 million to Iraq and refused to pay any compensation. But you see, if I lend you money, Iraq will want them to pay any compensation for the Rumaila oil fields, because you're using slander, you're actually stealing our oil, and refuse to give any territory to Iraq. So even though I lend you money, but well, I'm gonna steal your oil and I'm not gonna give you any territory. So Iraq was feeling, well, kind of sore. You see, you are stealing our oil, but you lend me money or giving me money, and last time these whole areas belonged to as one territory. Now you refuse to give me any territory at all. So, and on the 2nd of August, the next day, Iraq invaded Kuwait. I refuse to accept any of your offer. All of your land belongs to me. So 12 hours later, mission accomplished in exactly 12 hours time. Wow, Kuwaiti royal family flees the US and Iraq officially declares that Kuwait is now part of Iraq. It's that fast. So you can see that Kuwait was absolutely of no match Iraqi armed forces. So this commence the next part of series is called Operation Desert Shield. On the 3rd of August, the next day, so Iraqi armed forces started amassing the Saudi-Kuwait border. So after invading Kuwait, when they start to build their forces at the Saudi-Kuwait area, which is just next to Saudi Arabia officially requests UN help. They have just taken Kuwait, they may be taking us next, and this we cannot accept. So UN passed a resolution calling for the Iraqi withdrawal from Kuwait. On the 8th of August, 5 days later, UN forms a coalition forces under the leadership of US. Coalition forces basically means that they have soldiers from most of the countries from UN itself, which is a lot of countries, 100 plus countries. So UN sends the force to protect Saudi Arabia, and they call this Operation Desert Shield. And Saddam Hussein, when they saw this, decided to record the TV broadcast. Some call it propaganda, but let's take a look at what actually happened. This record 24th of August.
It was an extraordinary performance by any account. Iraq's leader Saddam Hussein and some of the trapped British families in Baghdad.
Are you getting your notes, Stuart? The cornflakes too. قبل الأخبار العراق ممكن I don't think all Iraqi students can get the cornflakes.
This film was evidently pre-recorded. It's not clear when. which was shown on Iraqi television today, that the Iraqi leader would know it would be picked up by the American television news channel, Cable News Network, reportedly watched by him in his bunker.
I am an Iraqi and I realize that if I were in your shoes, I would probably might Iraq. لكن لنقل بعض الأحيان الإنسان يضطر إلى حالات ليس من اختياره. But sometimes one is forced to face situations which are not of his own choice. Your presence here and in other places is meant to prevent the scourge of war. في بعض الإعلام الغربي ترجم درع يعني إبعاد ترجمها إلى درع قالوا أن العراق يريد وضع الجانب كدرع واقي في الأهداف الحيوية بينما نحن لا نقصد هذا وإنما نقصد أن نبعد شبح الحق. There is a semantic and linguistic problem here. We in our communique use the word dar in Arabic, which means to put away or to prevent. But when we use this word, Western media misunderstood the pronunciation of the word dar into dar, which means shield. And therefore, that we were using people as a dar, which means shield, rather than as a dar, which we meant, which means to prevent war. So there was a perhaps deliberate misinterpretation or inadvertent misinterpretation of our wording of the community. بس أنا أقول لأن إحنا أيضا عندنا أطفال في اختيارات فانكشنال إيه وعندنا أيضا نساء في العراق مثلكم وعندنا رجال نحرص على دمائهم مثلكم. So please forgive us because we like to have our own children, like Stuart and like Ian, and we also have our own women like you and have our own families. And we wouldn't want to, we know how you feel, but we are trying to prevent a war from happening. And we hope that you as guest, your presence as guest here is not going to be for long, too long. Because you are not hospitals here.
Our families know we know no destination, but we would like them to know that we are fit and well. Our parents are old, my husband and mine, and in ill health.
Yes, we shall make sure that your messages will reach your families in England.
Okay, so in response to the Operation Desert Shield, Saddam created this Operation Human Shield. They say that it's a misinterpretation. We'll leave it up to you to decide whether it's a misinterpretation or not. So that he actually gathered civilians, like U.S. civilians, and placed them in strategic key installation. Like for example, if it's like a military operation, you'll place them just beside installation so that in case they were bombed, well, these humans will be unfortunately lost, and it is your fault, the US for bombing them, because we place them there and they become sort of like a human shield. Whether it is true or not, we'll leave it up to you to decide. So this is him, Ian, the same child again, while hugging his savior. When he was rescued by these US commanders, they were having a hug. Okay, so thanking him for rescuing. After Desert Shield, you have Desert Storm. So what happened is on 29th of November 1990, remember that was in August, now it's in November, UN Security Council issued a final ultimatum to Saddam Hussein. The deadline to withdraw from Kuwait is 15th of January 1991. They have exactly 2 months to get out of Kuwait. But what happened is that on 15th January, the fateful day where the ultimatum was given, but Iraq ignores the deadline. It is already part of our territory. We are just taking back our territory. So on 17th of January, Operation Desert Shield has now become Operation Desert Storm. And 28th of February, the war is over. In about 1 month time, the war is over. Iraqi forces withdraw from Kuwait. So UN forces do not pursue Iraqi forces past the Iraq-Kuwait border. So their aim and objective is to remove the oppressor, which is the Iraqi forces. So their job is to make sure that once they reach the border between Iraq and Kuwait, they will stop. Well, this is for your SEQ. We call the impacts of the war. The acronym is KILLED, which is killed. The third part, you have Kuwait suffering the impact of the war on Kuwait. So they do suffer. The second I, social impact, you have death, torture, and refugees. Because the graphics are too vivid, so in this case they are officially censored. So in this case, but instead you'll be represented in words. They systematically carry out grisly acts of torture against Kuwait citizens with the approval of the national leadership in Iraq. And systematically carry out, what it means is that there was actually a system. So the first step is this, the second step is this, and the third step is this, and they are carried out against the Kuwaiti citizens who are not armed. So at least there's 24 torture sites. Wow, there's at least like 24 at least. And there is a confirmed torture by amputation. Amputation means chopping off, injury to various blood, limbs, eyes, yolk, tongues, ears, noses, lips, genitalia. While you have electric shock, like the sensitive part, your electric drill. Wow. But the invading Iraqi soldiers also, they allegedly beat Kuwaiti citizens, crushing bones, skulls, disfiguring their faces. They soak them in acid, and their axe were used in the beating. So when you use axe to beat someone, sometimes something's get chopped off, and women were, well, raped. This is a weapon of war as well. But it gets worse if you think that it's just it. They were made to eat their own flesh. It was cut from their body. Wow. 120 babies were left to die. 57 mentally ill individuals were killed simply because they were handicapped, and because they are handicapped, they were killed. And the logic was simply inhumane. And the L, loss of respect for the Iraqi government. So there was a second L is there's lack of fear and respect for the Iraqi government. So what it means is that when UN-backed Kurdish uprising against the Saddam Hussein government, they decide that this is the time where, during Operation Desert Storm, they will rise up against Saddam Hussein government. But they failed. The Kurds suffered for that, and they were backed by the UN. So what happened is that during the Al-Anfar campaign in 1988, they began a campaign of extermination against the Kurdish people living in the northern Iraq. This is known as Anfar campaign, and they were mostly directed at the Kurds who sided with the Iranians during the Iran-Iraq War, and it started way before. So this result in death of 50,000, and the estimated of actually 100,000 actually. Most of them women and children, and this can be considered genocide. The mass execution, disappearance of tens of thousands of non-combatants, widespread use of chemical weapons. Imagine sarin gas, mustard gas, and nerve agent. They just spread that one entire village can be gone in a matter of an hour. Imprison tens of thousands of women, children. There were extreme deprivation, forced displacement. Basically means they were sent out of their home because they destroyed their home, and wholesale destruction of 2,000 villages with their schools, mosques, farms, and power station. This is absolutely intolerable. And the second crackdown, after in 1991 Saddam lost control of Kuwait, what happened is that when he lost the operation during Desert Storm, he actually cracked down ruthlessly against several uprisings, because the Kurdish North, they were actually taking the opportunity to rise up against the Saddam Hussein government. So when the Iraqi forces return after the defeats, they start to aim these Kurdish villages. This led to wholesale massacre, gross human rights violation, the death rate for 20 to 100,000 Kurds. Okay, the last second one will be environmental impact on the region from radio interview. So this is what happened. long-term impact, there was no shoreline cleanup. There was million cubic meters of oil sediments within 12 years after a spill. Imagine the oil has been left there for 12 whole years, and the penetrate deep 30 to 40 cm into the mud. There's no way to get out of it, and it was a full recovery will take decades. And that will be all. So enjoy memorizing all this for your O-level. Thank you and have a very good time. The next chapter will be on transnational terrorism, and have a good day. Thank you very much.